Hey there, welcome to the Compared To podcast. I'm Heather Creekmore, and I am so glad that you are watching or listening today. Today, I'm here with my friend Dana. Dana White is an author, podcaster, speaker, and much to her surprise, a decluttering expert. Dana shares realistic home management strategies and a message of hope for the hopelessly messy in her books, Decluttering at the Speed of Light, How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind, and through her blog and podcast at A Slob Comes Clean. Dana White, thank you so much for being on the Compared To show today.
Thank you for asking me to come on. This is fun.
So we've hung out a little bit in real life. And what I love about you is that you are real and authentic. And as I was reading in your bio, I thought, it's so funny. Like, you never thought you would be telling people how to declutter because it was a thing for you, right? Like
Right.
being messy was a thing for you. And it's the same for me. Like, I never thought I'd be talking to women about body image issues because that was a thing for me. So how did this whole thing start for you? Where did you begin your journey in A Slob Coming Clean?
Well, I mean, it is the thing when if you would have asked me now, I used to say 10 years ago, but now I've been actually doing this for close to 11 years. So it's crazy. But, if you would have asked me at any point before the actual day when I started my blog, and really even for a couple years after that, if I would ever teach other people how to have their house under control or declutter, I would have argued with you. I would have sworn that this would be the one subject I would never, ever write about. But here we are. So basically, I wanted to be a writer. That was my dream. I discovered what blogs were back in 2008, but I didn't start until August of 2009. And the reason I didn't start was that my house was a disaster, and it had always been a disaster. It had always been a huge struggle for me. And so I thought, this is going to be something that is another thing that takes my focus away from my home, because I throw myself into things and my house just completely, falls apart. And I said, I can't afford to let something else take my focus away from my home. But I also, I wanted to write about, where I was in life, motherhood. And I would love being a mother. It's everything to me. And I love keeping a home. I love everything about being a mom and, wife and all that. But I felt like my house is such a disaster. It had always been such a struggle for me. And I tried so many times and failed so many times. And I felt like if I write about all these things I want to write about, I would have to hide the fact that my house is a total disaster. I didn't want anybody to find out what my house looked like. So I spent that first, year and a half before I started the blog trying to get my house under control. I had this motivation of doing something I really wanted to do, to write. I still failed. And that was what was so frustrating to me, was because I felt like God had called me to write. And yet the state of my house, which I had begged him so many times to change, please change me, make me organized. He hadn't answered that prayer. And that was keeping me from writing, from doing the thing I felt like he had called me to do. And so it was right before my second child went to kindergarten. I was only going to have one kid at home. And I was like, this is the time. This makes sense for me to start blogging. And I was praying, and I was really frustrated with God, honestly. And I said, why is it that you won't cure me of this messiness issue? And that was when he just made it clear that I should write about that. And I don't say this very often, but I heard God say, write about that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's actually a really good idea. Okay. So I thought, okay, this is something that will help me focus. This will help me stay focused on my home, because I felt like, well, that's my real issue. I never can keep my focus for a long period of time on it. And I thought, I will figure this out, and in a couple of months, I'll have it all under control, and I'll be able to start writing about the thing I really want to write about, which was basically anything except this, And so I started this blog thinking it was a practice blog. I made it to me I called myself Noni Blanco. Noni was short for anonymous. Blanco is, Spanish for white. So I was like, okay, that's, I'll just call myself this. And then what surprised me was, first of all, that I wasn't the only one out there. I was in this weird thing because I was thinking of it as a practice blog. I was trying to promote it, but not to anybody I knew. Like nobody I knew. My husband didn't even know that I had started this. So I didn't tell any friends what I was doing. But I just started, like doing what I knew. Back in those days, it was linking up to link parties or, whatever kind of stuff. And so I would do that. And so I was having people who were starting to come read my blog. And I really was petrified that people were going to be horrified because I was being completely and totally honest about my house and what I was doing and what I was trying and how this had always been a struggle. And people were not horrified. I'm sure some people were and just clicked away, but people started leaving comments and saying, this is my struggle too. Like everything you're saying is exactly what goes through my head. I thought I was the only one, which was me. I thought I was the only one. So the first step for me was realizing I was not the only person in the universe who struggled with this stuff. And that was really big for me on this path of accepting that this is how I really am. Like that was huge for me, knowing that I wasn't alone and knowing that all these people who were saying that they related to my struggles were really cool people. Like they were, I think, and this sounds awful, but you have this idea in your head of, well, what's wrong with me that I can't get this under control because it just didn't add up in my brain, and I'm like, these were intelligent women. They were very creative, artistic people. And I related to so many things about them, what I could find out, because it's the internet. But when I started to realize that their struggles and my struggles were the same and their passions and my passions were the same, I started to realize that the creative side of me, the part of me that wanted to be a writer, was directly related to the struggle that I had, of going all in on something and letting everything else, my house go basically. And when I realized that I realized, okay, well, this way that my brain works is how God created me. Like there's a direct relationship there. Not all creative people struggle with being super duper messy, but most super duper messy people are highly creative people, so yeah, it's a fact. And it's something that has been confirmed to me literally thousands of times over the last, 10 years of doing this. So that was, me staying focused, being completely honest. I had named my blog A Slob Comes Clean, thinking no one would ever know that it was me writing it. But because I had used such a horrible word, slob, which I'd always said, it's not like I'm a slob. I'm just, chronically disorganized or whatever I wanted to say at the time. But because I had used that word and because I was realizing this was part of how my brain worked, it's like I had no reason to not be completely honest because it was anonymous, And so that was when I started making real progress, was accepting that my brain works this way, which also helped me accept that traditional organizing advice, which is generally written by naturally organized people because they're the ones who like to talk about this stuff. I didn't have to feel like a failure because that didn't work for me. Instead, I just needed to figure out what did work for me and my unique brain and how God created me. And so I started making progress. And then it was another couple of years, honestly, before I was willing to own that title of decluttering expert. Because it took so long for me to realize that someone could learn from me about this thing that it had always been a struggle and honestly is still a struggle. My natural tendency, we were just talking about, my daughter had a drill team tryouts last week and it was all virtual because of the current situation, that we're in. And so it was our obsession for the week. She was practicing and she was learning and she was perfecting and we were videoing again and again and again and again, all these different things. And my house went back to not nowhere near what it used to be because I simply have so much less stuff in it. And I do have routines that I keep up with as much as I can in those moments. But, it's like, that's my natural tendency, is to ignore the house and throw myself into a project, And so I have to have systems set up and, clutter out so that when there's an explosion, it's a whole lot less stuff than it used to be. But, accepting this is my natural tendency and realizing there is something I can share with others. That was a huge step for me, is to realize, I can help other people in this situation without being perfect first.
Yeah.
Because I always thought I needed to have it all figured out before I taught anybody something.
Yeah. I mean, and that's awesome, because I think reading between the lines of your story, it's like, that's where comparison creeps in, right?
Absolutely.
It's like comparison creeps in and it says, look at all these beautiful, perfectly kept homes on Instagram, and you're not one of those. So
Exactly.
forget the whole thing.
I still struggle with it because I do. I mean, the whole idea when you mention Instagram of people talking about the grid, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about when I say that, but they're like, I just saw somebody, and this sounds horrible, but I unfollowed them immediately because I didn't actually know them. So it's one of those where I'm like, why am I following this person? I don't know.
Yeah,
but anyway,
absolutely.
It wasn't a personal friend or anything, but they said something about, I wish I could post this picture in black and white because I like it better that way, but I can't because it would mess up my grid. And that means like when you see all their pictures together, does it make this beautiful, cohesive thing? And I thought, that's not what I want. I mean, because it just made me feel like, oh, well, my grid is an embarrassment. Like if anybody goes and looks at my grid, they're going to be like, what is this person even putting on Instagram?
Mine too. It's awful. It's really awful. I mean,
but I have to make myself not care. You know what I mean? I'm like, that would take time that I don't have time to give. I mean, and it's fine if you want your grid to be that way. It's fine if that lights your fire. Do you know what I mean? If you love the grid, if you love that, and there are so many people who that's how their brain works and they love it, and that's great. But I cannot compare myself to those people because we're never like, I see the grid and I go, oh, that's nice. And then I see mine. I'm like, oh, whatever. And then somebody says something and I realize, oh, mine is a whole lot less than theirs is, and so I just have to stay away from that.
Yeah. Well, and I was just thinking as you're speaking, like, that's why what you're doing is so important, because I think there are so many of us, like I was joking with you before we started, that if my computer was turned the other way, like the bookshelf behind this computer is a disaster. I mean, I know there's like the rule of threes or something like that, or I remember that from showing our house. Like before we were able to show our house, they had to come in and just do, major overhaul on everything. But it's like looking at my shelves is just a disaster. And so I need tips from realistic, reasonable people like you, because I can't Marie Kondo. I can't hug everything. Like it's just not going to work for me.
Well, and that's exactly where I had to accept that I was that person, that there's an actual need for me to be honest about how this is a struggle and what I have to do to make it work. That isn't what normal people do, And I say normal people, and sometimes people get offended. I always just mean like normal is anything that's other than me. I'm not normal, and I've never tried to be, but it, and two, for people who are listening and are like, oh, what, if I hold back on what I know, then there's a big gap of information that people really do need, because I always said, my frustration with traditional organizing advice is I was lost on page 3. Like I felt like their before photos were my dream after photos. And so I could not, so I was like, well, what do I do before this? But how do I even get to this point that you think is your starting point to get organized? And so I couldn't find anybody who was writing about the total disaster to, oh, okay, now it's time that we can actually start talking about getting organized, And so that's where I come in, and I still don't love it. I mean, I've embraced it and I love my job. I think and being honest is so much more freeing than trying to hide. ever was, but I still cringe, and I still sometimes will hit publish on something while I'm making this face. Like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and put that out into the world because that is what I needed to see. And I wasn't seeing it anywhere. Like I needed to see, oh, okay, I'm not the only one in the world who has an actually disastrous, messy space, and that's hard. I mean, that's like, really, God, that's where you put me.
Yeah.
I don't get to be cool. I don't get to be impressive or whatever. So
yeah, it's funny. It's like it is giving up that desire for people to think you're perfect, right? Because I think that's something we all fight. It's like, okay, there's part of me that really wants you to think I have it all together, And so by doing this, I've got to show you that I don't have it all together. But what a gift. I mean, I remember as a pastor's wife, I'm still a pastor's wife, but when my husband was the lead pastor of our church, I remember those first couple years, like the pressure, just internal pressure was always on me. Like my house had to be perfect. If people were coming over, it had to, look a certain way, be a certain way. And then as God started working on my heart, I realized it was probably a lot more freeing for people to come to my house and see that I had dirty dishes there. To see that the laundry wasn't all folded. There were laundry baskets sitting around, those kind of things. And so letting people see that my house wasn't always perfect was a hurdle. One of my most popular blog posts ever is called How Cleaning Your House Like a Crazy Woman Relates to Your Body Image. Because I think a lot of women that have body image issues or struggle with it, like I think that's the hurdle. The hurdle is I want people to think well of me. And so I'm worried about what all this looks like. And then I'm also really worried about what my house looks like when you come over. But when you're not coming over, then it's all bets are off. So,
yes,
Dana, for those of us who live often with the all bets are off kind of home decor. I married a Marine. So, my husband puts my children, if it wasn't for him, we would live in completely different conditions, but he puts the kids to work. So slobs like me, where do we start? What's your quick tip?
Okay. So, number one is to realize that your house is not a project. I love projects. We were just talking about how I enjoyed the fact that my daughter had, we're in the middle. Are you telling people we're in the middle of coronavirus as we're recording this?
Yep. That's fine.
Yeah. So as we're recording, whenever this comes out, that having something to obsess over last week lit my fire. I enjoy that. So I like projects, that's just how my brain works. And it's a great quality in a lot of areas of life, but it is not a great quality in keeping your house under control. So I always thought I needed to get my house perfect. I just need to clean it from top to bottom and then maintain it. And in reality, that never worked because, first of all, when do you have time to clean it from top to bottom, especially once you add kids and then kids get old enough to have their own activities and all the different things as life gets busier? It's just not reality for me to be able to say I'm doing nothing else for this day or this 2 days or this week or whatever to get my house under control. And so I would put it off longer. It would be more overwhelming, which meant I put it off longer. And it just never ended up happening. Besides, if I did get my house perfect, like for a party, I would want to enjoy it and just be like, oh, I did all that work. And I wanted to sit back and just, live in my clean house, except that meant my house was not staying clean, so it just never worked to have the project mentality with my house. So because I was desperate, because I didn't know what to do, I decided I am just going to focus on the things I see that tend to not be issues in other people's houses, and they are in mine. So I started with my dishes. I said, I'm just going to do my dishes every day. Don't know the perfect way to do them. I'm just going to try to keep them done. And I started adding tasks. I basically would work on one for a week, and would until it started to not feel foreign to me. And then as that started to feel more natural, not completely natural, but I would add another task that I would do. And what I learned was it's the daily stuff that is the difference between a house that's under control and a house that's not. So the two daily things that I have narrowed it down to be the absolute most important are having your dishes done at some point in the day. Okay, whatever that means. There's no perfect way to do it, just at some point in the day. And after a week of obsessing over that, you'll figure out what it looks like in your home right now. Okay. Which right now is unique. I mean,
there's
it's
a lot of
different
dishes right now.
Yes, tons of dishes. And then doing a 5-minute pickup. And I do mean 5 minutes. I don't mean trick yourself into actually working for 30 minutes, but literally set the timer for 5 minutes and pick things up and put them all the way away. Not gather them up and then at the end of 5 minutes, I'm going to go put them away. Actually, this goes here. Anything else go to that spot? I'm going to grab it too and take it. So, and here's the thing. And I'm going to plug my book really quick, but it's also all, everywhere else that I write online. But I was the person who thought I was smarter than that. If that makes any, I thought I was smarter than all the women ever who've ever kept their house under control. I was like, there's got to be a better way, than actually just doing the dishes every day. So in my first book, I go into all of the reasons why I didn't believe that was true. Where I thought there's got to be something different because doing the dishes is not fun at all. And so the reason I bring that up is because I know how I was. I know that when someone said, "Oh, just do your dishes every day," I was like, it can't be as simple as that. It's not as simple as that because this, and this. And I acknowledge that because that was me. And so I don't want someone to think, oh, she's oversimplifying. Oh, if there's anything I ever don't do, it's oversimplify.
Yeah.
I can complicate anything. So I just give it a try. Give daily stuff a try.
Yeah. Well, let me jump in for a second because it makes me think of, well, for example, when I'm talking to women about spiritual growth, it's well, spend 5 minutes a day reading the Bible. No. I want to be closer to God. I need something, spend 5 minutes a day reading the Bible. But no, it needs, there's all these excuses, but my husband, when he talks about this, I've heard him say this from the pulpit, it's what do football teams practice? Well, they practice throwing the ball and tackling it. It's the basics. And every single day they do the basics. That's what a foundation of a good football team is built on, whether you know football or not. It's the basics, right? And it sounds like that's what you're
really
saying.
Basic science. It is, but it's that idea that there has to be a trick or magic or and it's no, I'm sorry. There's no magic. You literally have to do your dishes every single day.
Yeah.
And I call it dishes math, because it's, and that's part of the problem for me is I thought doing the dishes was this big, huge project because I didn't do them every day. And one day's worth of dishes, I didn't even know is only 10 to 15 minutes worth of work because whenever I did the dishes, it was after 2 or 3 days at the least. And it was, hours worth of work where 2 days worth of dishes is not just double the time because there's so much finagling and stuff that you have to do. And, you can't get it all in one load or whatever. So then it becomes, from 10 minutes, it goes to an hour. And then the third day it's hours, so yeah, you're exactly right. It's the exact same concept of that can't be enough. And so I'm not even going to try it because I would rather sit down and create a list of all the things I'm going to do to have a perfect house. But then that list itself is overwhelming. And by the time I've finished writing it, all that energy that I had to change and be completely different from now on for the rest of my life, it's all gone,
Yeah.
And my house doesn't look any better. And then I lose the list anyway. So,
Well, and I think everything you just said there applies to what women do with their bodies, right?
Absolutely.
It's it can't be enough for me just to go on a 30-minute walk and, try to cut out 1 to 2 desserts a week. I have to go on a crazy diet, and I have to exercise for way too long every day to a point where I can't sustain it. And it's like, and none of that, I don't believe any of that really solves body image issues, but just kind of separating body image from like what we do to make ourselves physically more healthy. We do the exact same thing. I've got to make this list of all the ways I need to be better. And I think that kind of loops right back around to your first suggestion. Your house is not a project. Your body is not a project either, And so I think that's a perfect synergy there. I love how all that goes together. Yeah.
Well, and then there's the clutter. The clutter is the same thing. And here's the thing about clutter. I always tell people, start with the dishes, but clutter is just as important, because the more stuff you have in your house, the harder it's going to be to do the daily stuff. And if you're not doing the daily stuff, any decluttering that you do, it's like it didn't happen. So, all those things go together. But the same thing with clutter is looking at a space, a pile, a messy drawer, a messy closet, a messy living room, whatever, and thinking that is a project, as opposed to, my steps that I use. My first step is to grab a black trash bag and throw away trash. That's it. And that will, number one, get you moving, but it'll also start you differentiating between just this overall idea of stuff and picking out what can just be thrown away. And when you do that, you start to see individual things that you're going to have to deal with, as opposed to just this mass of clutter, which is overwhelming. And so, it's that working through, and that also means that you can make progress. You can't make it better. You can't finish, but you can make progress in 5 minutes of just throwing stuff away, and it's going to look better than it did before. So it's the same idea of, there's so much more value in little bitty steps than there is in trying to fix everything and change completely starting now. Okay. Now, that's the way I feel.
The tortoise wins the race, right? And the hare has to take a nap. So
exactly.
It's inch by inch, right? Okay. So I didn't warn you about this, but just kind of as we tie things up today, I don't know if I'm getting staticky or not again, but can you hear me? I think you're frozen.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Now you're blinking again. So what about our closets? Because this is a topic that comes up in the blog and things I do. Women, especially those of us who have kind of been on the up and down of the scale and the size. Like, I had a dress in my closet from 15 years ago. That's a size that it won't even fit on my leg now. Right. But what advice do you have for women like me who tend to hold on to all the sizes just in case? Any suggestions there?
Well, so there's this magical concept, which is not magic at all, that I call the container concept. And what that is okay, so the story behind it is that I always thought containers were for putting things in. Like, I thought organized people like containers, so I would buy them, and mine never looked like other people's. And so I didn't, but so I didn't have any kind of, I didn't see the results that I thought I was going to. And I was like, I don't understand. So one day I was decluttering and I was talking to myself and I was like, container. And I realized that the word container, the root word is contain. Like, it's meant to be a limit. And so the very short version of this is that I realized, okay, containers are not for putting things in, they're for making the decision of how much I can keep. And I realized that every space in my home, my entire house itself, is a container. It's a limit. It's a natural limit. And the beauty of it is that when I let containers, which your closet is a container, when I let containers make the tough decisions, it takes the pressure off of me of making those decisions. So, for example, your container is your closet is a natural container. It's a space that is defined. Like, the answer, and I used to think this was the answer, but the answer is not to get a portable closet, to add to some other space in my room. The answer is to accept the size of the actual closet that you actually have in the life that you're living. in the house that you're in. Okay. And the stuff, basically, okay, I feel like I'm not making sense here, but I've written about this a lot, so I'm not sure why I'm not making sense, but anyway. But basically, the way a container would work, it's a little bit harder with your closet because I am not a fan of pulling everything out and then only putting things back, because that just ends up being a disaster later because I never get to all this stuff out. But anyway, start pulling things out until things fit in your closet well. Okay. So the stuff that deserves space in your closet is the stuff that you wear right now. You can totally keep those other things for, that like maybe don't fit right now, but that's what I'm hoping someday will fit, or it just has some kind of sentimental value. For me, I was a theater arts teacher, and so I have several things that I'm like, oh, that makes such a great costume for whatever,
Sure.
even though I don't necessarily need it anymore, but whatever. So, but when you view your closet as a limit to how much you can keep, it helps you identify the things that deserve space in the container. Does that make sense?
It does.
And when you start to think of it that way, sorry, my computer's doing weird things. When you start to think of it that way, it frees you from thinking through the fact of, okay, should I keep this? Let me try to be realistic about, will I ever be this size again? Or let me try to be realistic about this, which can really get into your head. I mean, like you can really go down a lot of roads there that are not necessarily healthy.
Yeah.
But instead to just say, is there space in the container? It's not me. I would keep this, except that the fact that it doesn't fit in my closet. And since it doesn't fit in my closet, I can't keep it. I can keep it, but I might have to get rid of something else. And when I compare the two things of this black shirt that I wear all the time and it fits me no matter whether I've fluctuated here or there, like I love this shirt versus this thing that I wore 20 years ago, all of a sudden it reveals to me, oh, well, yeah. I mean, if it's between these two things, I'm going to keep this one, but there's only space for one of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and the one thing that I've talked to women about before is just if it's causing you shame to have it in your closet. I mean, like you wouldn't, I don't know, like if there was an award that that's a really horrible example. I was thinking if there's an award you won that you would be embarrassed about, I don't know. Slob of the month. I don't know. I can't really think of a good illustration there. But it's like you wouldn't put that ridiculous award on your shelf for everyone to see. But yet, like we keep these size, way too small clothes in our closet. And it's like sometimes I feel like you go in the closet and every time you go in there, it's like a bullet to your body image. You're like, oh yeah, that doesn't fit anymore. And so it's like in those cases, and like you got to get it out of there. But I really
like a parallel would be that's maybe not quite so sensitive to a lot of us, but a parallel would be moms who are like, okay, do I keep the 18-month clothes when I'm not for sure if I'm going to have another kid? I mean, like we don't know. Just like us, we're not for sure what's going to happen down. Well, am I going to regret this? Whatever, which I've just had to learn to get over decluttering regret, to just say it's better to have a space that I enjoy and I can function in and I can live in. I'd rather have that and risk the decluttering regret than hold on to it and not be able to use my space and enjoy it. But so it's the same concept with the mom who's not for sure should she keep these other clothes. It basically comes down to you can keep it if you have the space to designate to it and to make sure it's actually in a place where you'll be able to find it and know where it is later. Okay. And most of the time that severely limits how much you can keep, and so maybe you do have a little bit of space, but over time, the more you declutter your closet, you're going to go, you know what? I really would rather keep this than that. And so, this doesn't deserve the space. And it just starts to change how you view it when you can blame the container and the space that there is instead of going through all the analysis of whether or not I should keep this.
Yeah, that's really good. Why do you think stuff has such a hold on us?
So in my Decluttering at the Speed of Life book, I talk about dreams and like I really believe that a lot of, and I am not a licensed mental health professional, but anyway.
Neither am I.
But I did write a book and they published it.
Exactly.
Like, so, I get to
You got
talk about
cred.
these things. I believe that a lot of clutter is the physical manifestation of the denial stage of grief. And here's the thing. If I just have the stuff and I ignore it, I pretend it doesn't exist, I can avoid going through the accepting of my reality, and maybe and for a lot of people, it might be their work clothes. Maybe they have gone into a different stage of life and they're wearing yoga pants right now, which, I mean, we're all wearing yoga pants right now, right? But I mean, right now.
Yeah.
But maybe they're in another.
I've got yoga pants on, blow it.
No, exactly. I have shorts on. But they're going through this phase of life, and to let go of those office work clothes that they never once spent a lot of money on, that represented a time in their life where they felt very capable and very respected, and they had a certain identity. That's hard. I mean, and acknowledging that, letting go of that is a grief process, because you are letting go of, or walking through, I mean, you can't just skip over grief. Like, there's an actual walking through the process of acknowledging that things are not what I thought they were going to be, whether it's from the death of a loved one and you're having to go through life making decisions on your own when you thought you were going to have somebody else to make those decisions with you, whether it's a divorce, whether it's just simply moving into a different phase, all of that kind of stuff. If you just leave the stuff there, you can avoid having to feel those feelings. But to go through that stuff, you're going to have to walk through that grief, and you're not going to be able to deny anymore. So yeah, but there's a lot more to it. I mean, there's, obviously there's tons of things, but I do think that's a real process, especially for women, because a lot of times that stuff represents a phase of my life, which represented a part of who I was. And maybe I'm not that person anymore, or I don't know how to be that person anymore, or whatever. So.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, one thing I've been thinking a lot about is how, and I'm sure you've heard this, like anyone who had grandparents that went through the Depression in the 20s, in the 1920s, was raised by, parents who grew up under those parents and learned hoarding, right? Like learned to, like make do, scrape it together, even if that wasn't their reality when they got older, they learned those tendencies. And I've just been thinking in all of this, like, are we just repeating it? I mean, I know what my pantry looks like. And my son dropped a jar of spaghetti sauce the other day, and his first response was, "Oh no, we can't afford to lose a jar of spaghetti sauce during a pandemic." And I was like, "No, dude, we're okay." But no, it's like, but they're hearing those messages, whether I'm saying them or not. They're getting that.
Well, exactly. My people, that's what I call my people who, relate to, who need what I have to give, what I have to share. This has been a real struggle during this time. I mean, it's been a legitimate paralyzer to think, it's kind of like all the things that we've kept, we're like, oh, I'm so glad I kept that, because now is when it feels like it's not, but it feels like the world is ending. And I was keeping that just in case the world ended, and so it's that mentality, or it's the thinking of needing something, not having it, and remembering having decluttered it in the past and thinking, well, I don't want to do that again. So there's a lot of struggle there. I have to go back to, but I can still throw away trash. Even if I don't make any difficult decisions, I can still do those real basic things that I have in my steps, which is the trash, and then the easy stuff, getting it back to its established home, finding homes for things. That's part of my process, so it's like the letting myself do all the things up to the point where I have to make difficult decisions, because the reality is a lot of stuff is not a difficult decision, but I put it off because I know that that pile or that drawer contains a few difficult decisions. And so it just seems like the drawer itself is full of difficult decisions. And instead, letting myself say, I'm going to make all the easy decisions and it's going to be so much better, even if I don't get to the difficult decisions, so there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot right now that is hard for people who struggle with clutter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. Well, Dana, I know that every one of my listeners or viewers would benefit from reading your books. So I know Decluttering at the Speed of Life, and tell me what the first one was.
How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind.
And we can find those on Amazon and all the places, I know.
Yeah, just go to slobcomesclean.com/book. And that has all the links to everywhere. Great. They're in all the formats, Audible and Kindle and Nook and all that. So.
Wonderful. And I'll put all those links in the show notes so everyone can connect with you. Well, Dana, thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate your wisdom and your thoughts.
This has been fun. Thank you. I do love how there's such a correlation between these subjects.
It's really crazy in a way. I mean, maybe we should write a book together.
Right. Let's do it.
Sounds good. I'm game. We've got time now, right?
Right. Except that we don't.
It
feels like we should, but we don't at all.
I know. That's one of those myths. Anyway, because everyone thought that they would have all this time to clean their house right now. And I don't know. Mine hasn't been cleaned. So
no. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's wrap this up, Dana. Thanks again. And thank you for watching or listening to the Compared To podcast. I hope something in this episode has helped you stop comparing and start living. Bye-bye.